Just now, we're just going to zoom into our next conversation about the headmaster and housemaster of Ghanasco, who have been asked to step aside while some investigations begin about the truth or otherwise of a certain video that we have seen in the public domain, which claims that students of the school have to sleep in old toilet facilities. The GES is unhappy about the situation because there was some information given to the GES about the capacity of the school. We are told about 1,700 thereabout was what was given, and 1,400 students were posted to the school. And so, according to GES, there shouldn't be a need, for this seeming struggle for a place for the students to lay their heads. Well, Stephen Anti joins me this morning for more. Dr. Stephen Anti, I beg your pardon. Dr. Peter Anti. Sorry about that. Stephen Anti is on my mind this morning. Executive Director, Institute for Education Studies. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure you've been following keenly the rather disturbing videos that we've seen and the response of the GES. What are your quick thoughts?
Thank you very much, and good morning to your viewers. I've been following the story. For us, some of these things are not news to us because every now and then we receive information about inadequate infrastructure in our secondary schools and the challenge that the increasing enrollment, which is a good thing, has brought to our secondary education sector. So it was not news to us. What is a little bit surprising is the way that this issue is being handled.
What exactly is your concern about how it's being handled?
Well, we think that this is a small part of a bigger problem that is facing our secondary education, and we were thinking that although it's good that the needed measures needs to be taken in terms of the approach that might have been adopted by the school authorities. We think that the GES should use the same energy to address the teaching challenges that is facing the various secondary schools in the country. We don't believe that this is an isolated case. We believe that this is part of a bigger problem that we have been talking about for a long period now. So for the GES to react quickly and ask the headmaster and the other authorities to step aside for investigation to take place is to say that they are not aware, or means that they seem to suggest to us that they are not aware of the accommodation challenges that students are facing. And that, for me, is surprising because this is not anything new. Maybe what is intriguing is the fact that the figures given by the school authorities seems to not to add up to the information that GES is having. If that is the case, then we can look into that. But after this, the GES should understand that this problem is not a Ghanasco problem. It is a problem that cuts across most of our secondary schools, and the needed action needs to be taken as early as possible.
But Dr. Anti, would you blame the GES? The GES basically has a role of overseeing education in the country. It says, tell me the capacity of your school and I will send the numbers. Here we are told that 1,700 was the figure given, and there's a shortfall of about 300. They sent 1,400. In that case, we shouldn't have people struggling for accommodation, right?
Yes, that is true. If that is what it is, then in that case, we shouldn't have students struggling for accommodation. But then we should also ask ourselves, all these students in the school, are they all having access to beds? So if the data...
So would you rather, Dr. Anti, because I'm just trying to figure out how the GES, is implicated in this matter. Are you suggesting that it must have a way of verifying the claims that the schools make to them. So if a school says I have a capacity for 1,200 or 2,000, are you saying GES should independently verify if that is so and if there are corresponding facilities to take care of those students?
One, I'm suggesting that the GES should be aware that most of our schools in the country are facing infrastructural challenges. Two, I'm saying that if a figure is given to the Ghana Education Service, it is duty bound on them to verify, as you put it, to ensure that the students that are being sent to those schools are truly going to have the needed kind of accommodation that they deserve. This they can do by just cross-checking the EMIS data that they collect every year. This they can also do by checking the enrollment history of that particular school. But one thing that we need to understand is that whatever it is, the GES cannot say that they are not aware that in most of our secondary schools, students are struggling to have access to beds. Some sleep on the floor, their mattresses are on the floor. Their mattresses are on various verandas and other places that you cannot allow students to sleep. Some sleep on various top buses. These are issues that Ghana Education Service can never say that they are not aware. What makes this issue a little bit different is the fact that GES is indicating that the school authorities gave them a number and that the total enrollment in that school seems to be less than the number. So we would wait for the report to be, the investigation to be concluded and the report to be shared. But GES can never say that they are not aware that this is a little part of a bigger problem in our senior high schools, and they need to step in quickly and address it.
Yeah, I'm not sure GES is claiming a lack of knowledge in this matter, but what should this situation prompt then? What's the way forward, seeing that you say this is not an isolated case? There are many scenarios like this across the country. What action should this prompt the GES towards?
Well, I think that, I'm not saying that the GES is saying they are not aware, but the strict nature by which they are addressing this issue indicates that they want to wait for incidents like this to happen before they help to address the challenges that various schools are facing. And if headmasters want to employ other means to ensure that students do not sleep in other places, then the headmaster or the school authorities will find themselves wanting. So GES should not sit back and wait for some of these things to come up before they issue these directives and other things, because they know that schools are going through this challenge. What I think they should do is an immediate audit of the data that is sent to them by the various school authorities. I think that they need to get people to verify these information to ensure that students are given the needed accommodation that they do. But I have to say this because my interaction with some of the schools indicates that sometimes, because the student numbers might be less, some teachers might end up not having the requisite load that they need to get. And some of the school authorities are embarking on some of these additional enrollment to ensure that teachers get workload, their total workload to do. This is something that we also need to look into and find out whether that is the way to go, and whether does that suggest that in certain schools there are SS teachers who can now be moved to other schools who need these teachers.
Well, it's interesting for me because as a head teacher or the head of a school, if you have concerns, why don't you rather raise them instead of just showing up the numbers and putting, young people through such, stress? And I don't seem to get the logic of that. But I mean, it is what it is, and that's what happens in this part of the world. But then again, I'm coming back to the schools, because if I told you, Dr. Anti, for example, that I could prepare a meal for 2,000 people, and you trust me with a contract, and I end up not delivering on it, I am the one to blame, isn't it?
Sure.
Right. So you mentioned that GES should verify these information and all that. But what about the head teachers who are or who may be, given figures that are not representative of what they're able to handle in their schools?
Given that the information from GES is what it is, because they said there is an investigation ongoing, and that is why I don't want to make that a categorical issue, that indeed the vacancies declared and the students enrolled, there is a variance. Given that that statement is true, it means that there is something going on in the school that the Ghana Education Service needs to get that or needs to delve into. But my point is that this is something that is not new to the Ghana Education Service. I hope that is the crux of the point I want to make this morning. That the Ghana Education Service, by their data, knows that most of our schools have these challenges. And what have they done over the years to ensure that these challenges are addressed so that we will not get to a extent whereby students would have to embark on these kinds of adventure in order to get a place to sleep. That is the point I'm trying to make. I'm also trying to say that we are hoping that what the GES is saying about the vacancies declared and the enrollment is true. If that is the case, it also means that certain headmasters are enrolling students as outside the number of outside the capacity that they have. They declare vacancies that are beyond that number. That will bring into question the whole framework that we are using to enroll students using the free SHS, because we know that students are sent to the school. This is automatic placement. Even if you want to do protocol, the protocol will still go through the system from the school level to the to the headquarters or to the placement office. So if that is the case, how would it be possible for a headmaster to admit more students outside what has been placed, or outside the number of students that have been placed, or the number that he is supposed to submit to the Ghana Education Service? So for me, it is dicey for me. That is why I just want to wait for the reports to come out so that we'll be able to see what really the situation is. But I have to also make the point that your point about them reporting, my sister, these issues are always reported.
Right. Let me bring in Dr. Clement Apak. He's with Parliament's Education Committee. Good morning to you, Dr. Apak, and thank you for joining us once again to discuss matters focusing on education in the country. This time round, we're looking at accommodation because a certain viral video has sparked a reaction from the GES, which has led to the interdiction of a headmaster and his senior housemaster over the use of old toilet facilities or the conversion of toilet cubicles into dormitories. The GES says, one, this is unacceptable, it disapproves of this, but raises concerns about the capacity of the school as against the number of students there and the reason why this should not even come up in the first place. And so the conversation I've been having with Dr. Anti is not necessarily who to blame, but whether or not we should not be kind towards the GES this time round.
Well, first of all, let me say good morning to you and good morning to Dr. Anti, a very strong voice in the area of education and all the good work that he has been doing with his organization to bring to bear what we ought to do to ensure that teaching and learning benefits us as a nation. And of course, your viewers. Yes, I am intimately aware of the said video because I am one of those who received it from the media person whose work uncovered the situation and who shared the video. But he shared 3 clips with me. One, he showed evidence of human fecal matter, ostensibly around in the precincts of Ghana Secondary School. The other showed a student who was interviewed about sanitation conditions and why that student and others were dwelling in space that ought to be serving as a toilet facility. The third clip showed the facility showing clearly the presence of material, or the like accoutrements that one would normally associate with a secondary school dormitory. So you would basically see mattresses and the different cubicles, a chop box. And in that video, it captured at least 2 students, and one of them was holding crutches. And when the videos got to me and the story authored by the reporter, and for the sake of transparency and for the records, this reporter is the Tamale or Northern Regional reporter for Rainbow Radio. I then decided to do some background checks to find out the authenticity as well as the veracity of the story. So my checks with Rainbow Radio indicated that the original intent of the reporter was to look at sanitation. Upon getting to the campus, the reporter noticed that there was human fecal matter dotted around certain portions of the campus. So upon inquiring why that is the case, students then revealed that the reason why they have to engage in what we have come to refer to, unfortunately, as free range was because of the lack of toilet facilities.
Right.
Then when the reporter pressed further, he was then directed to various facilities that ought to be serving as toilet facilities. And one of them is what was captured in the video. So when he then got there and saw that, yes, this facility, from the look of it and the design, should be serving as a toilet facility, and yet it has indications, visual indications that it was being lived in, he then chose to ask students that he met in the same space why they had chosen to make that space their abode. It was then that he was told, and this is captured in one of the clips where he spoke to one of the students. The student then said that they had come to dwell there because of challenges to do with space. So this is the background to the story. And so when I also became aware, I shared the story and I shared the video. Now, to be honest and candid, all of this was happening when I was myself in the Northern Regional capital of Tamale. Because as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, we had arrived there on Easter Monday to commence our work, as we do every year when we look at the Auditor General's report for pre-university institutions, in this case, secondary schools, and the district, municipal, and metropolitan assemblies, as well as technical universities. Luckily for me, and having become aware of the story, the headmaster of Ghanasco appeared before the Public Accounts Committee on Friday, and after responding to queries based on the content of the Auditor General's report, I then sought permission from the chair of my committee, the Honorable James Kuchi Abdiji, to ask the headmaster questions around the video and its content. And I was granted permission to do that. In my questioning of the headmaster, his rendition of the story was that, yes, I wanted to find out, first of all, whether the videos were authentic and whether this was indeed Ghanasco. To which which he confirmed that yes, this was Ghanasco. So I then asked him whether he, as a headmaster, management of the school, had converted a facility that should be serving as a toilet facility as a dormitory to accommodate students. To which he said no. He hadn't done that. But that their school had sufficient space, and therefore there wouldn't have been the need to convert a facility that is not suitable or was not designed for to accommodate students as accommodation for students. Then I asked him, then why would students move to go and live in a space like that? Because that is what is shocking to me and shocking to many who have seen the video.
Right.
Then he responded by saying that he wasn't aware that students had moved into that facility, and that facility is an old facility which was no longer in use.
Okay.
And those cubicles indeed existed, but he wasn't aware that students had moved to live in that facility, and it must have happened on his blind side. So I then said, well, this is what has come to the public domain. I have become aware of the issue, and I am asking you these questions because as a member of the Education Committee, clearly I will have an interest in these matters. He then said he only became aware when the reporter who did the story called him to seek his comments about the discovery that students were living in those cubicles. And that was when he became aware. And that was right before he came to respond to the call by the Public Accounts Committee, but that he had designated the senior housemaster to look into the matter and to take other media houses around, because the fact that the video had gone viral had piqued the attention of many media houses. So that was the rendition of the headmaster to the Parliamentary Committee. But the question still remains that why would the students sleep in that space and even grant an interview confirming that they dwelled in that space, and even indicated that because they don't have access to enough toilet facilities, they have been easing themselves in the open, and some of them have suffered. In fact, one student who spoke said he has suffered from malaria and typhoid, and the student then went on to make an appeal to the effect that if they could get about one or two additional toilet facilities. So the point I'm trying to make is that something definitely
needs to be done.
Right. I don't see why any student would, on your own volition, if indeed there is adequate space in a normal traditional dormitory, would take your mattress and your chobox to go and inhabit a place of that nature.
Right.
So the decision by the Ghana Education Service to get the matter investigated, I think it's in the right direction. I disagree with the directive that the headmaster and the senior housemaster should step aside. Because whether they converted it to a dormitory to which the headmaster has denied, or it was the students who on their own moved in there, would suggest that there is a challenge to some extent in terms of space. And you see, Zoe, the point I'm trying, did I get the name right?
My name is Bernice.
Bernice, rather.
Yes.
Bernice Abubedi, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember your time at CTFM.
No, that's actually that's not me. That's my sister, so it's fine.
Oh, that's so?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, that is an interesting fact.
Yeah.
But back to the point. It tells me that there's an issue. I say so because the issue of space and its adequacy is one that we ought to look at and to define properly. It is entirely possible. It is entirely possible. We are still waiting for the outcome of the investigation, but it is entirely possible that although officially, as per the GES letter, and even the rendition of the headmaster, that the number of students in the dormitory would still be high.
But Dr. Park, so yes. I get your point, and I'm very, very grateful that you've shared other facts to the matter, and it makes the conversation a lot more better with the details that we've received, because we all know sometimes what happens in high schools, and it was important that we clarified that this was not a functioning toilet facility, it was an old one. And if many of us will be honest, I mean, many high schools didn't have a lot of functioning toilet facilities of this nature as far back as 10 or even 15 years ago. Okay, they moved on from the cubicles and they started using more open bathrooms and other stuff like that. But the question here remains, if a headmaster or head of an institution says, I can accommodate this number of students, it is assumed that he has enough space for it. So GES's concern is, you told us you could house 1,700. We gave you 1,400. That is about 300 less of the number. Definitely that shouldn't push us to this point, should it?
Well, I think that is why I agree that there ought to be an investigation, because, as I said, the story, it doesn't add up. It depends on who you listen to. And indeed, on both sides, it seems that there are certain factors that are not contestable. But it has become the issue of the chicken and the egg. So we need to get drill deep. But what I'm saying is that, yes, GES, they have their figures. Yes, the school is saying that it wasn't pressured and that there was no official decision to convert that space for students to go and live in. But the point I was trying to make is that the definition of adequate space ought to be factored in. I am a native of the northern part of this country, and I know the weather conditions. We are just now transitioning from the very hot climatic regime of the dry season into the rainy season. In fact, the first rains are just now beginning to show. And so the point I was trying to make is that officially, yes, perhaps the numbers and what we are seeing in terms of the figures, well and good. When you factor in the climatic conditions and the fact that the numbers have increased over the years, it is not even just secondary schools, even at the university. When I was at the University of Ghana in Commonwealth Hall, what we call the inner room was space for only one student, and the outer room was also space for one student. But now the inner room is actually space for 2 students, and the outer room is space for 4 students. But it is all the same space, accommodating that number of people. But clearly, their ability to function in that space, in terms of all their needs, certainly will be different. Because when you have one student in an inner room and one student in an outer room, versus 2 students in an inner room and 4 students in an outer room, there will be challenges. So I am foreseeing a scenario where it may not be official, but because of some of these factors and because of the climatic conditions, it is entirely possible that some of the students on their own volition, I am not saying, may have been decided to relocate in this space because we know it's an old structure. The cubicles were not fully being served as toilets where people were going there to ease themselves. As a result of the need to have some more comfort compared to what they will have in the traditional dormitory. And in fact, I'm also getting reports that in some instances like that, the seniors would hound the juniors out of the dormitory. Some juniors would have to make do with that kind of space, or some of them in the evenings would take their mattresses to go and sleep in the classrooms and then wake up very early to come to the dormitories to prepare and go to class. So the point I'm trying to make is that we need to take a look in all of these conversations about space and what we can define as adequate space.
Right, Doc, we would have to leave it here at this point. Clearly, we need to wait for the report after the investigations are concluded. But there are just a lot of angles popping up to this. Okay, so why would students decide to defecate in the open? I know of places and schools where there were toilet facilities. Students just preferred to do that because they were scared of infections and all that. So we'll just allow the investigative team to do its work. But thank you so much for sharing more details with us. Dr. Clement Park is Deputy Ranking Member on Parliament's Education Committee. So let me just wrap up with you while we try to get the PRO of the Education Ministry for their side of this case as well. Dr. Anti, so we've received additional information from Dr. Apak. Any more you'd like to say?
I want to reiterate the point that the Ghana Education Service and the Ministry of Education should not wait for some of these things to happen before they step in terms of infrastructure in our schools. But let me also add this. I think that the supervision role of the housemaster and the headmaster needs to be brought into question, and that is why maybe the committee would do us a very good service if they do a thorough job, because under no circumstance should a housemaster not know where students are sleeping. I'm amazed. A housemaster should know where students are sleeping within the schools, the hall or the house that the students have been allocated to. Under no circumstance should a housemaster, the headmaster can be pardoned, but a housemaster or a senior housemaster who is responsible for all the houses on campus or in the school should not be oblivious of where students are sleeping. That is a no-no, and I think that we should pay attention to that, and maybe when the report comes out, we will know whether these renditions and these stories are what they are.
I appreciate your time here. Dr. Peter Anti is the Executive Director of IFES. We've been joined by the PR Education Ministry. Hello, Kwesi, it's been a while. But just tell us briefly what you've been able to ascertain as at now. I'm more interested in the numbers. Are we able to tell why the school said 1,700 and was given 1,400, but there still appears to be infrastructure challenges? Do we know as of now?
All right, good morning, Dennis.
Kwesi, can you please speak up a bit? It's difficult to hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Still difficult.
Are you able to hear me?
All right. A little clearer, yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes. At the end of the day, it's come to our attention. And of course, you have seen the Ghana Education Service issue the pressure to that effect, to the extent that they've even asked the headmaster and the senior housemaster to step aside while investigation goes on. If you look at the placement regime that we do practice in Ghana here, we place students based on choices. And so, at this point, the CSSPS Secretariat or the Ghana Education Service is bound to place students in schools that they select. But of course, that has to be in tandem with the availability of spaces within that school. So, if you look at this year's placement, for instance, over 705,000 vacancies were declared, even though the students that were eligible for placement was at around 500,000. So almost 200,000 spaces were still available within our schools. So largely, we do not have accommodation challenges simpliciter, but it's just based on the placement regime that we practice. So you may have some of the schools that are overly subscribed at every point, having students having the desire to go to that school. while some of the schools too, you go there and there are just empty spaces. But of course, within the conversation that we are having, particularly reference is made to the Ghana Senior High Tamale. What we did and what we have been doing as a way of practice is that we confer with the leadership of the school to give us information on the capacity that they are able to take in terms of the students. And the declared vacancies that came from the school was that they had the capacity to admit 1,790 students. When we did the placement, 1,536 students were actually placed there. But of course, sometimes after the placement, it is not all students that didn't take up the placement at the end of the day. So if you want to measure the total number of students that enroll in the school, you may have to use the enrollment figure to find a fair or to get a fair idea about the total number of students in the school. And that was 1,467. So clearly, you are looking at almost 3,000 spaces that is left even unattended to. And it means that we even have the capacity to send about 3,000 students to the school. So we, as a Ministry of Education, found it very surprising and disturbing that we could see footage where students were sleeping in unauthorized places. Of course, initially, the information we take from the leadership of the school was that it was, a facility being constructed by the school, and initially they had planned to put WCs in. But of course, if you look at the large numbers within our secondary schools, most times WCs or the water closets are not really advisable on health reasons or on health grounds. So a lot of times they may defer to other ways of improving sanitation. So this was a place that was more or less not used, and it was not authorized for students to place in, to be sleeping there. Unfortunately, we found a situation that circulated around, and then the Ghana Education Service felt like they needed to investigate this, get to the bottom of it. But of course, it was only fair that in the interest of natural justice and not to also disturb the investigation process or distort it at the end of the day, the headmaster and the senior house master actually step aside, because, ultimately when it comes to the management and administration of the school, it is within the prerogative of the headmaster. But of course, largely when it comes to matters of students' accommodation and other things, it is also within the prerogative of the senior house master. So the Ghana Education Service felt like they support in order not to distort, or prejudice the investigation that's supposed to go on, they must step aside. So I am very hopeful that at the end of the investigation, we should be able to get to the end of it. But so far as the Ministry of Education is concerned, the place remains unauthorized.
Right.
Students were not supposed to sleep there. There were more than enough spaces within that particular school to accommodate more students. And we are very surprised that it came up. Sometimes it may be largely, on face value analysis due on a lack of supervision, proper control mechanisms to check all these things within the schools. And this possible, just like when you have 4-bedroom apartments and there is a storeroom which is not used, and then you have your daughter saying that, I'm going to sleep there for fresh air. Yes, as a parent, during the evening, you have to be concerned where your daughter slept. As to even whether she slept in the bedroom or that place or other place, you should be concerned.
Right.
When you have situations like this, we needed to take an action.
Just a quick one here. What usually happens when students are about to be enrolled into schools and the schools tell you this is the capacity we have? Do you carry out independent audits, or you just take what the school tells you as the truth?
Yeah, obviously. If you look at the Ghana Education Service, the way the secretary is what they do, every time they take a head count in the various schools vis-a-vis their spaces and the infrastructure availability there. But of course, the head teacher also being part of the Ghana Education Service also provides such an information, also to affect that is going to live with the students. And then if the head teacher is saying that I am unable to accommodate this number of students, clearly you cannot send those students. So yes, we have a fair idea, but as a way of confirmation, we also require the head teachers to say that, well, we have the capacity to take this. Of course, I mean, it is not possible that if a school can take 1,000 and the head teacher says they can take 7,000, we will say 7,000 students. Clearly, I mean, that will be a very mismatch. So yes, we have our own understanding of what.
How often do you do these? How often do you do these auditing?
Oh, it's very regular. It's very regular. I mean, even I have not been to the ministry for long, but I know that at every 10, particularly when the freshers do, there is that head count. So there are always previous data to make considerations.
So quickly, Kwesi, we have to wrap up. But when a head teacher tells you, for example, that I can take 1,700 students, does he provide evidence of corresponding facilities, so classrooms, desks, beds, dining hall infrastructure, or he just gives you the figure?
That's what I'm saying, that at the end of the day, even we as a Ministry of Education or Ghana Education Service has a fair idea of the availability of space. What the head teachers will only do is to check once again and confirm whether or not there is space.
Kwesi, sorry, my question was very specific. Does the head teacher provide evidence of infrastructure?
The head teacher does not necessarily have to provide evidence. We have such data. I mean, there is the SPMU unit where we have data on all available infrastructure within every school.
That includes beds, desks, classrooms, all that?
Obviously.
All right.
Obviously.
Kwesi, thank you so much for speaking to me this morning. That's all time will allow us. Kwesi Kwarteng is the PRO of the Education Ministry, and he's just been sharing with us the ministry side of this rather disturbing news about students having to stay in old toilet cubicles at Ghanasco. We know the head teacher and the senior housemaster have been asked to step aside for investigations to continue. We'll be following this keenly and let you know what the developments are. I am really sorry we couldn't take your thoughts this morning. Please forgive me. God willing, we'll make some more time during the week to get interactive with you. But before I go, a big happy birthday to Theophilus Owari. You are CEO of Distinct Consult in Accra. Happy birthday, long life to you. Also, happy 70th birthday to Justice Angelina Mona Domachare, Justice of the Court of Appeal. Here's to greater years ahead and good health. And happy birthday to Cynthia Bedre Madrup of MTN, wishing you God's grace and good health. This is from Paulina Arthur. And from Benjamin Akakwe and myself, a very happy birthday to all of you who are celebrating your birthdays today. We are grateful to God for your life and super grateful that you join us every morning for the AM show. That'll be it for today, but God willing, we're back again tomorrow with a show that focuses on what's most important to you. Until then, it's goodbye. Do stay. News Desk is up next.